Both of those banks have been reporting sharp rises in profits on the back of strong performance in investment banking. Net profits over at Goldman Sachs in the final quarter of the year rose to £1.8 billion, and JP Morgan has reported that its profits were up by a whopping 54%. That takes them to £3.6 billion. For more on this, we're going to talk to Chris Skinner. He's a banking analyst. Chris, you're joining me right now from our central London studios. Thank you very much for coming in. First question then, why are the banks doing so well when the economy seems to be in the doldrums?
Well, the US banks in particular are finding that there's a strong demand for lending. A lot of people are remortgaging in the US domestic markets, corporate lending markets are active, and the more that banks lend, the more likely they are to make some profit. And that's what's happened with JP Morgan. In the case of Goldman Sachs, the slackness in the markets, the lack of trading that was taking place in the last few quarters has picked up. There's far more trading taking place. And also they found that a lot of their own activities in the bond markets are reaping results because of the investments that they're making off their own book of business. So on all fronts, and that's true of JP Morgan too, by the way, they're finding that the markets are coming back in their favour.
That's an interesting comment there. Does that put the US in a different position to, say, the UK or indeed Europe, where banks might be lending, whereas over here governments have, spent the last couple of years trying to coax banks into more lending?
Well, the US banks were never actually taken into government control. They didn't have the real hemorrhaging that we saw in the UK and European markets, where some of our banks in Europe in particular were going out of business, and therefore they've been nationalised effectively. That did not happen in America. The banks did get bailout money, but they're now finding that the US markets are strong. They're not in contraction like Europe or the UK, and they're finding that actually a lot of people, because of the low interest rates, are remortgaging, for example, because they can get better rates with other banks. So as a result, lending is going up. In addition to all of that as well, they did reserve quite a lot of money in JP Morgan's case for bad debt, and that bad debt hasn't come through, so they're also finding that they're getting better results and they can take back more money onto the balance sheet.
Now, very quickly, we have been talking about for about the last 8 months or so that the US growth has been much more anemic than we might previously have anticipated. So if you were a gambling man, are you expecting banks to do better, or are you expecting that to catch up with them at some stage?
I think the US markets have stabilised, although the fiscal cliff discussion between the Republicans and Democrats has not helped their economy at all. I'm far more concerned, to be honest, with the fact that the US regulators are fining European banks and UK banks like HSBC and Standard Chartered heavy fines of billions of dollars, and yet JP Morgan has gone through exactly the same process of making losses with bad risks and with money laundering, but they haven't had fines. They're being a little bit protectionist.
Chris Skinner, pleasure as always. That's the current